and spoil the fun. The sea was wet as wet could be. The sands were dry as dry. You could not see a cloud because no cloud was in the sky. No birds were flying overhead. There were no birds to fly. The carpenter were walking close at hand. They wept like anything to see on earth such quantities of sand. If this were only cleared away, they said it would be grand. F7 maids with 7 moms, he swept it for half a year. Do you suppose the walrus said that they could get it clear? Ooh, I doubt it, said the carpenter, and shed a bitter tear.
Oysters, come and walk with us. The walrus did beseech. A pleasant walk, a pleasant talk along the briny beach. We cannot do with more than 4 to give a hand to siege. The eldest oyster had looked at him, but never a word he said. The eldest oyster winked his eye and shook his heavy head, meaning to say he did not choose to leave the oyster bed. Trees. Their coats were brushed, their faces washed, their shoes were clean and neat. And this was odd because, you know, they hadn't any feet. 4 other oysters followed them, and yet another 4. Thick and fast they came at last, and more and more and more, all hopping through the frothy waves and scrambling to the shore. The walrus and the carpenter had walked on a mile or so, and then they rested on a rock conveniently low, and all the little oysters stood here and waited in a row. The time has come, the walrus said, to talk of many things, of shoes and ships and sealing wax, of cabbages and kings, and why the sea is boiling hot and whether pigs have wings. wait a bit, the oysters cried, before we have our chat. For some of us are out of breath, and all of us are fat. No hurry, said the carpenter. They thanked him much for that. A loaf of bread, the walrus said, is what we chiefly need. Pepper and vinegar besides you are very good indeed. Now if you're ready, oysters dear, we can begin to feed. But not on us, the oysters cried, and turning a little blue. After such kindness, that would be a dismal thing to do. The night is fine, the walrus said. I do admire the view. It was so kind of you to come, and you are very nice. The carpenter said nothing but yeah. Cut us another slice. I wish you were not quite so deaf. I've had to ask you twice. It seems a shame, the walrus said, to play them such a trick. After we've brought them out so far and made them trot so quick, the carpenter said nothing but yeah, the butter spread too thick. I weep for you, the walrus said. I deeply sympathize. With sobs and tears, he sorted out those of the largest size, holding his pocket handkerchief before his streaming eyes. I oyster, said the carpenter, and you've had a pleasant run. Shall we be
Wait. We've got a person missing because of this new system and because I haven't figured it out. 2 seconds. We're still missing you, Sunday. Don't start yet. They may be able to hear you, or maybe not. I don't know yet. Maybe they can hear you. This might be a second though. Fucking, I hate everything so much. All right, and come on, there you go. Happy day. Hey, Sunday, do you feel like doing some theory tonight?
Nah, I'm actually kind of want to watch the follow-up Ethan Klein debate that just happened.
I'm very okay with this. If you want to. Why is that showing?
Show me how we're actually fitting this on the screen, first of all, because this is...
Well, we're not yet. I've got to fix the thing first.
Okay, well then. I should probably get a hold of a copy myself.
Got to fix the thing up. Got to move it over. Because this is our normal news time thing. And I want to make us a little bit differently set up for this.
Is that going to make us have to redo the entire thing when we do the news time thing?
No.
Okay.
No, I've duplicated. I'm setting it. I've duplicated the news time thing to move everything around. We're okay.
All right. Famous last words. So
It's fair.
For people who are confused, tonight we are going over the beginning of Bruno Latour's On the Modern Cult of the Factish Gods. That mask on the cover is actually from here, by the way. It's a Haida Gwaii mask from where I'm actually sitting at the moment. And there's also some typos at the end of part 1 of chapter 1, which bugged me.
Really?
Yeah. They start off, at one point, they're quoting from an Indian novel, and they're referring to a shalogram, and then they start spelling it without an S for some reason. It's odd.
I'm not sure why.
I don't know which one's the correct one. And then there's a sentence in here that actually doesn't make sense, which when we come to, it'll stand out.
We'll get there. I have no doubt.
But that's an issue in translation. This is obviously not an English book. But it is very good.
Good.
It's very good. However, Catherine Porter and Heather McLean, I notice, are given credits for the first chapter being translated, so it's their fault.
Possible.
Yeah.
Possible. Slowly getting this large enough to justify it. So we can have that sort of full screen. Because it's important, I think, for this one to have a little bit more space. So we can discuss it and we can talk over it. Because it is... There
are also diagrams with this one.
Well, there's a lot of art. This is, if you haven't read like Foucault's The Order of Things, for example, there's a huge amount of art that's in place in this that they talk about, that he's using as reference. And it's important to have as part of that entire thing.
Yeah, well, he actually is kind enough to put the art, most of it at least, actually in the book. Foucault does not, so it's very confusing if you have no experience of the art Foucault's referring to when you're reading the first chapter.
Well, his entire thing on Las Meninas is kind of like pointless if you haven't seen it or can't see it.
Thank God for Wikipedia. Some people...
No joke. Do you want to start with your... Because you finished it recently, and I'm curious your thoughts on the entire book before we dive in, because I think this preface is a important piece to it, and I figure someone might...
I haven't read the preface in a little while. It's been slow going, so this will actually be...
No, the entire book. What do you think this is about? Because for me, what I like about Bruno Latour's Cult of Factish Gods is it kind of outlines, if there is a such thing as like Latourism, one of the things he's more famous for, like what is the concepts he creates. For me, the way he talks about our existence and modernity is pretty much central to how I read Latour, and I think how he goes through everything from laboratory life to, I'm doing one of his pieces in the other reading. Name's escaping me. It's late. I haven't finished my tea. He's got a bunch of amazing work, and the stuff that he sort of plays with is, I think, best explored here, and it's actually a very small book for what it is.
Are you thinking of the polity one?
Am I thinking of the polity one?
Yeah, the one published.
No, the name is escaping me, and it's fine because my brain is just dying slowly, which is fine. It's not a big deal. It's not the worst thing that's ever happened. Pasteurization of France, and which is a part of this, and then there's another piece he did that I really like that we've got in the... I can't remember it. Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. The works that he's got and what he's done, I find to be really, really powerful. And Pandora's Hope, that's the name. Pandora's Hope. Which I always had on my shelf when I was working at Lightstorm, which always made me smile when people would notice and go, "Oh, what's that?" It's like, because they had Pandora and Avatar. It's the name of the moon, Pandora. That's okay. Not
Shameful.
Everyone cares. It is. It is shameful. Made me smile. And I think Cult of the Factish Gods is like the best intro to Latour that there is. His other works, Laboratory Life, is like a deeper ethnological style study. It's a little bit drier, a little bit more, in my experience, harder to get through, things like that. Cult of the Factish Gods is like perfect.
Well, I mean, it'd be better to
philosophy.
do Cult of the Factish Gods first, anyways, because he offers some corrections to that book.
Fair,
here.
but it's also it's not so much even the corrections. I'd say it's it is a more overall sound structure that really talks to the ideas of it rather than sort of playing inside of those things. So,
for me, it's I kept thinking of In the Mouth of Madness, reading bits of this, not for any particularly deep reason.
I mean, is that true of every work you always read?
Well, sometimes I had actually a really pithy example from a debate that took place in the Relics Hall in season 2 of Andor, but I decided to spare you this time.
You fucking goddamn it, dude.
There's that whole monologue at the end where Sutter Kane is explaining. The whole relationship between him and the main character as well. Sutter Kane is explaining how when people start to lose the ability to distinguish fantasy from reality, the old ones can make their journey back, and the stronger the belief, the faster the journey. There's sort of implied in there is a essential breakdown that he's making very early on in the book, where we moderns, quote unquote, I guess have sort of fooled ourselves into thinking that we have kind of
made something.
Yes, but also escaped from a kind of trap of subjective fantasy, where we are able to navigate the world with a clarity that someone operating in a realm of credulity towards things that they have actually been supposedly duped into thinking were beyond their own creative powers. Because obviously when he's talking about Factish gods, this is a reference to a book which was called The Cult of the Fetish Gods. I can't remember his name. But it's talking about the experience of Christian colonialists from Portugal and further on, encountering native peoples who would craft their idols and then would worship them, and they'd be like a part of all their like religious rites and whatnot. And they would find this kind of laughable. It's like, are you stupid? You made this thing. Obviously, either you're really simple or you're manipulative bastards who have made up these things yourself that somehow you think have special powers when you have made them yourself. And one of the things that's very interesting is that Latour does is he doesn't really attack the, how do I want to put this? He
attacks the central paradox of that idea, that there is kind of two sides. There's the I control the things I create,
yes,
or the things I create control me. Because that paradox is the claim of modernity, that we live in a place where we control the things we create, not like those terrible savages.
Well, more to the point, not just that, which is true, but also he attacks the presumption that there is a common view between these two things. Like what the person who crafts the idol is doing is making, as it were, like a kind of text with propositions to believe in, and isn't embedded in a world of practice that allows like a certain way of life to operate, where it's not a matter of like, I've written my own Bible that I then believe is divinely inspired because I wrote it, because it's divinely inspired, and so on and so forth. Like, they're not stupid. They're doing this because this is a part of their way of life. It's a part of how they work.
We're going to be getting to that today.
Yes.
I'm interested because we are going to have some differences here, which will be fun. So I think I'll jump in. First up,
Okay.
Up front, we need to talk about Ougré's engraving here called The Sculptor and the Statue of Jupiter. It's an old fable, as they talk about. And just to mention before I start reading, because I'm going to end up reading, the thing to realize is on the left here, if you can see it, there's this lovely guy. Do you want me to share my screen to you Sunday? I probably should do that, huh?
That would help. I do have a copy of the PDF on
But
my
it'd be
other
useful
monitor,
for you
so I
to see
can still-
literally where I'm at. That
It would
definitely
be
good.
it would be for.
Here you go.
There we go.
On the left here is the sculptor, stunned at his creation and his statue that he's terrified of it. That's the idea. So to read. Let us start with this engraving by Jean-Baptiste Audrey, entitled The Sculptor and the Statue of Jupiter, from the beautiful edition of the Fables published in 1755. It is most likely that the artist, overtaken by the fable, has somewhat exaggerated La Fontaine's intent. In the morning, the sculptor enters the workshop where, the night before he had given the last touch to his statue, he now stands with arms extended, terrified, expecting Jupiter himself to strike him to dust with his thunderbolts. Indeed, the man whose skill did make had scarcely laid his chisel down before himself began to quake and fear his manufacturer's frown. Have you ever met an artist so naive that he could be thus impressed? The fabulous seems to believe it, since he claims that such a naivete is precisely the origin of the sin of idolatry. This trait we see in infinity. Between the baby and its doll of wax or china, it may be a pocket-stuffed folded shawl. Imagination rules the heart, and here we find the fountainhead from whence the pagan errors start, that over the teeming nations spread. With violent and flaming zeal, each takes his own chimera's part. Pygmalion does a passion feel for Venus chiseled by his art. Is this not well known? Pagans are like kids who let themselves be taken in by their own chimeras. At night, they fabricate statues, poems, dolls, and myths. In the morning, they believe that though these have made themselves through spontaneous generation, that they deserve a cult or to be loved madly. None of these fabricators understands that they have manufactured their objects. The sculptor is terrified by his statues, the child by her dolls, the poet by the gods he has invented. As to Pygmalion, he is not only stupid, but also incestuous, since he fell in love with Venus, his own daughter, in stone. All offer cases of this disease of the mind, which has since been called fetishism, and by which the fabricators fall into the trap of their own contraptions. La Fontaine concludes, all men, as far as in them lies, create realities of dreams. To truth our nature proves but ice, to falsehood fire it seems. I'm going to kind of just go for a little bit here, because it's not really making a point quite yet, but it is. This is a surprising moral coming from the pen of a fabulist. Is it true that one should remain so icy that no reality whatsoever should be given to one's dreams? Such is an implausible portrait of a rational being. What, a poet without poems, a sculptor without statues, a child without dolls, a fabulist without fables, a rational and naked human obliged, in order to regain a normal temperature, to annihilate the work of his own hands. Here, an even more unlikely portrait of an irrational human being. Before the artist has been taken by his own creation, he benefited from a total freedom, as we learn at the beginning of the poem. A block of marble was so fine, to buy it did a sculptor hasten. What shall my chisel, now it's mine, a god, a table, or a basin? A god, said he, the thing shall be, I'll arm it too with thunder. Let people quake and bow the knee with reverential wonder. I love his breakdown of the poem and how he's talking about it. One of the things, if I got kids, and it's one of my favorite things. I've got them on my microphone and everything. My son makes shit all the time. My daughter's finally started. She just turned 3. It's right around that age. And they do this. They make things or creatures or tape together stuff or cut out stuff or whatever, and they give them names. And then the next day, or even later in the day, but like later on, they're just those things. They weren't created by them. There's no part of you that could ever even, whether you say it or not, they have no desire to be believing that. They created the thing. It's a really adorable thing that parents see all the time with kids. And I love how Latour brings that in here, because it's basically this idea that these fabricators, they don't really understand, but they also don't really care that they made these things. He even brings up Pygmalion as the example, which is itself kind of a bit of a wry joke for him. But all of this is kind of what he calls, or what I think he's referring to be referred to, this idea of the disease of the mind that is fetishism, the The break of, I didn't make this and it's got life. The disavowal of one's own creation, but the avowal of its existence, its own power, whatever it is. This fetishization that sort of exists. And then conversely, he goes back to the opening of the poem to talk about the first part, the rational person, which is the person who knows, oh yes, no, I'll make it a god. It shall be so powerful. And he's aware of what he's doing, later terrified, and how
specifically, he does it backwards, which I appreciate, because what it really emphasizes by going backwards is like, because you're starting from, he's impressed by the magnificence of this statue. And with that by itself, you might even think that the story is one in which the thing has actually come to life. But the emphasis here is actually on the fact that there is a firm grasp of the fact that this material is entirely under the power and has like a general, besides the like artist's ambition, like a general lack of significance
100%.
overall.
Yeah, absolutely.
And what I like about it is he's inserted this really neatly alongside a discussion of fetishism from the point of view of a very condescending type of anthropology or Christian superiority. But what he points out is not, oh, these are the same, because they're not. What he points out is that there's a consistency in the grasp of the idolater on the thing that they are doing. Even if, for example, you do not like find it something that you have any desire to replicate or any use for as someone who's not within that culture, they have an understanding of the activity that they are doing and its relevant import to their life situation and to their world. Whereas this artist, in The Sculptor and the Statue of Jupiter, there is a complete divorce in the universe this person is operating in when he goes into his study and is awed by the statue and terrified by it, and everything else leading up to that point. This is a surprise. And I like that he does that, because it's not just, oh, they're the same. It's no, oh, they're the same, but you missed it.
But you missed it. And that's where he goes on to just continue.
Yeah.
What surprising changes of temperature from ice to fire? Do you know any artist so bipolar that she abruptly alternates from a feeling of total freedom to that of total servitude? Is it the way we all create? Is it the way we have been created? Is it the sort of life we breathe into our own beings? Either you have to destroy all the things you have created in order to remain cool as a rational being, or else you will be taken in by the creatures of your own hands, as if there were no plausible passage between fetishism and iconoclasm. La Fontaine is making fun of everybody, no doubt about that, of the idolaters, yes, but also of those who claim to have no illusion and who believe the idolaters to be naive, and thus also himself. Audry, the remarkable engraver, is also mocking himself, La Fontaine, the sculptors, and the gods. In his engraving, it is Jupiter who opens his arms in astonishment and terror at the view of the maker, who suddenly opens the workshop door as if the god had been taken by surprise. Everything is wrong in this fable. Everything is right. Everything is to be taken up again. It is not a fable for nothing. Because this engraving illustrates so well the double bind of creation, it could serve as the emblem of this book. On the one hand, it tells us that we have to choose between fiery illusions and icy reasons, but on the other, it tells us the opposite, since there is no way to choose between the two as soon as we put our hand into the creation of anything. This is a double contradiction, one explicit, the other implicit, and folded into the work of art itself. The moderns, is the phrase to remember. The moderns possess this interesting peculiarity of always dreaming of a temperature that they never had any chance of attaining. I like the phrasing of this. Sorry, I'm going to resize this, make sure it gets a little bit larger. But
I think it's fine. It's fine. It's fine.
Oh,
It's taking up a good part of the screen.
Yeah, but now it's taking up more.
Well,
So there you go. No?
That's fine.
Okay.
I'm not complaining.
All right. The moderns possess this interesting peculiarity of always dreaming of a temperature that they never had any chance of attaining. In order to draw their anthropological portrait, it is necessary, as La Fontaine indicates, to decrypt their fable and detect the secret passage they have unwittingly dug between fetishism and iconoclasm. To inquire to this double bind, I propose here two makeshift notions, that of factish and that of iconoclash. These are unique words, concepts created for this book. Really, really important. I might be pardoned those two neologisms if I say that they are the result of two rather distinct moments of field work. The first is the outcome of an internship that I did in 1995. I just like the idea of Latour doing internships in the 90s. Good, 50-some years old. I adore that. The consultation of the ethnopsychiatry of Toby Nathan at the Centre d'Evreux in Paris. I wanted to check the vast literature on fetishism and anti-fetishism against the actual practice of a real practitioner. The first chapter of the present book is the translation of the pamphlet I published on this experience. Then, for 4 years, I had the good fortune of preparing the exhibition Iconoclash, for which I was curator, with several friends, and which opened in 2002. If the notion of factish allows one to suspend the belief of disbelief, that of iconoclash... The notion of factish allows one to suspend the belief of belief.
Actually important here, sorry.
It is. No, it's fine. One more time. If the notion of factish allows one to suspend the belief of belief, that of iconoclash aims at suspending iconoclastic gestures. Instead of another iconoclastic exhibition, we wanted to do an exhibition about iconoclasm, transforming this notion from a resource to a topic. The sumptuous catalog being out of print, it seemed a good idea to republish its introduction, since the question of the right way to consider images, and more generally mediations, is at the core of all the issues of fetishism and iconoclasm. I have added a third chapter in which I compare religious images to those of scientific practice, so as to propose another take on the science and religion debate. Boy, does he fucking ever. This book, thus composed, requires nothing more from the reader than the suspension, no doubt momentary, of beliefs in belief and in critique. It is, in my experience, the only way to focus on the creations of our hands and to pay one's exact dues to creator and creatures alike.
It's worth mentioning before we dig in that if you're under the impression that the title of the book is suggesting that we fetishize things that we imagine to be facts, kind of, but also no. That's not actually the point here. No, you disagree?
I think there is, I think the third chapter, goes into that nicely.
Okay. Well, as far as the first chapter is concerned, not so much explicitly.
We'll see as we go through.
Right.
Would you like to read this opening paragraph from chapter 1, or
I can, which is fake, by the way.
It might be.
I think it might be. So, quote, as reported by Councillor de Bruoche, emissary to China from the Korean royal court in the mid-18th century.
It's solid satire. It is solid satire.
The light-skinned peoples living in the northern reaches of the Atlantic are said to have a peculiar way of worshipping the gods. They go on expeditions to other nations, seize statues of their gods, and destroy them in huge bonfires, insulting them with cries of fetish, a word that in their barbaric language seems to mean forgery, nonsense, lie. Though they insist they have no fetishes and that it was their own idea to free other nations from such things, they seem to have very powerful gods. Indeed, their expeditions frighten and fill with dread the peoples who are attacked in this way by rival gods, who these people call Modun, and whose power appears.
Modun. I like that. I mean, it's the old gag of like the alien coming down and re-describing the Earth kind of thing.
Bo'o-wa'a, yeah, and whose power appears as mysterious as it is invincible. It seems that in their own lands they have built many temples, and the way they worship inside them is as strange, frightening, and barbaric as it is outside. During great ceremonies repeated from generation to generation, they smash their idols to pieces with hammers. They seem to benefit significantly from these ceremonies. For once they have freed themselves from their gods, they can do whatever they please. They can mingle the forces of the 4 elements with those of the 6 kingdoms and the 36 hells, without feeling at all responsible for the violence they unleash. Once these orgies have ended, these people are said to fall into deep despair. At the feet of their shattered statues, they cannot help but hold themselves responsible for everything that happens, which they call quote-unquote human or free will subject, or else they believe, on the contrary, that they are responsible for nothing at all, and that they are entirely produced by what they call nature or causal objects. The terms are hard to translate into our language. Then, as if terrified, by the way, the first hint that this is fake is that nobody in this time period refers to causal objects like that, but whatever. Then, as if terrified by their own daring and in order to put an end to their despair, they repair the Modun, which I guess is the real clue.
The modern
gods they have just broken.
The modern gods. It's modern.
It says Modun there, Brooks.
I know.
They repair the
That's the
Modun.
joke.
They repair the. You don't know that. They repair. I think they're. This is a serious thing he's doing.
All right.
Yeah. They repair the Modun gods they have just broken, making countless offerings and sacrifices. They put their gods back up at the crossroads, holding them together by iron hooping, as we do for barrel staves. They are also said to have created a god in their own image. In other words, one just like themselves, sometimes absolute master of all he does, and sometimes completely non-existent. These barbaric peoples do not seem to understand what it means to act, quote unquote.
Beautiful.
One of the things I do like about this, I don't know if this is deliberate. There's a thing in anthropology of religion that's been commented on a few people like William Kavanaugh, where there was a confusion early on when they were trying to classify the religious institutions of India, because they noticed that despite being strictly monotheistic, Muslims would use the same temples as the Hindus, which they did not succeed in separating from each other very, very effectively, and so on and so forth. And there was a whole bunch of practical reasons for this, among other things, that issues of like that we would relegate to like administration and economy and government and so on and so forth were all done through these institutions as well. But it ended up with the strange notion that, well, actually the religions of these people sort of allows a different attitude vis-a-vis churches as we understand them in Europe. And it's very interesting that that's sort of inverted here. I like that.
It's one of the things I like that he plays with. But this entire bit, I think, is fantastic. And it's a great way to open it. Again, the idea from the go is very much to have us talk about what it means for us to have idols, what it means for other people to have idols, for people to have idols, the things we don't consider anymore, especially in the global capitalist structure that exists. It's not a thing that we sort of talk a great deal about anymore. So when we talk about having idols or destroying other people's idols, smashing them with hammers, the worshiping of fetishes that we don't call like these, the entirety of this is obviously intended to be satirical and intended to make a very particular point. I dig the shit out of it. I think I dig the shit out of it. It's a great way to sort of open this up, because as we jump forward and we sort of talk more about this, we're going to be talking about 2 types of objects. And the 2 types of objects are going to be really core to this entire first part of the book. Again, this is not a long book. This is not a long book. We're going to have a lot of back and forth, but it is not super long. The idea of fairy objects versus fact objects and how these things sort of come about and where we talk about them, and really talking about the colonial encounter, which is what he sort of opened this with, as if it had been reversed. Like that's the joke, is like colonialism birthed fetishism as we talk about it, but in reverse, we could easily have been the subject of being called fetish worshipers by another culture for exactly the same reason.
Yeah, what I was pointing out, what I found kind of interesting that he did, which it didn't click on first reading, is that he doesn't just do that though with the institutions that we sort of associate with factfulness. He actually bleeds them over to each other, in a way that's just really interesting. Like he doesn't just talk about they believe in a god called science or something, like from Nacho Libre. It's everything mixed together, which I liked.
Agreed.
So Do you want to read it or want me to read? I can read it.
I'll go for it.
Okay.
In order to mock both our own foolish beliefs and those of others, our free-thinking ancestors handed down to us the scoffing tone set by Voltaire, among others. But in order to mock all forms of worship in this way, in order to overthrow all our idols, we had to believe in reason, the only force capable of seeing through all these follies. How can we speak symmetrically about ourselves and others without believing in either reason or belief, while still respecting both fetishes and facts? I have tried my hand at this somewhat awkwardly by defining agnosticism as a way of ceasing to believe in belief. Belief is not a state of mind, but a result of relationships among peoples. We have known this since Montaigne. The visitor knows. The person visited believes. Conversely, the visitor knew. The person visited makes him understand that he only thought he knew. Let us apply this principal case to the moderns. Wherever they drop anchor, they soon set up fetishes. That is, they see all these people they encounter as worshippers of meaningless objects. Since the moderns naturally have to come up with an explanation for the strangeness of a form of worship that cannot be justified objectively, they attribute to the savages a mental state that has internal rather than external references. As the wave of colonization advances, the world fills up with believers. A modern is someone who believes that others believe. An agnostic, conversely, does not wonder whether it is necessary to believe or not, but why the moderns so desperately need belief in order to strike up a relationship with others. Before he gets into the example, any comments here? Any thoughts, Sunday?
Well, it clarifies a little bit of what I was trying to get at earlier when we were talking about the introduction.
Yep.
The thing he's attacking, I hate having to use that language of attacking, but it's the most intuitive thing, and I'm very tired, is the presumption that when one of these peoples that anthropologists encounter are dealing with what they are calling idols, and there's a whole lot that's being laid into that language as well, but as they're dealing with them, they're sort of assuming that the attitude is of sort of like when we talk about people religion shopping or church shopping, where they're looking at the thing and they are considering whether or not they believe some proposition about this thing or that it represents or whatever. And they are observing the absurdity of believing a proposition that you have, a fantastic proposition that you have made up yourself. And obviously you wouldn't, because you made it up yourself. It's like, okay, are these children or are they liars? And that rests on the assumption that the thing that the person is doing when they make the idol and when they worship using the idol, or whatever is actually being called worship when they're using the idol, is of that nature and isn't something else. Isn't, which is not to say, like, do they secretly not believe, quote unquote, but rather that it's a distinction that doesn't make any sense given the actual attitude of the people in play. It's sort of like, it's one of the things that comes up, and I think he actually goes into it in this chapter.
He will.
Well. It's one of the things that, I don't even know what I was going to say. It's one of the things that...
Well, we're way beyond this first paragraph, so I'm trying to figure out, because he will go over this, for sure. But I don't want to step too far ahead, because
all right,
we're only at the part where it's like talking about that first introduction. And it's that introduction and the way that encounter happens that I think is, again, for Latour, who very much plays in the materialist Deleuze Marx camp of things. When we talk about that first engagement, the people who have, well, they may have their own fetishes of sorts, but it's the Spanish conquistadors and others, as we'll kind of see in a moment, that show up, and they know, those who are advanced, we know things, but we visit, and as such, we're able to see that the other side doesn't know things, that they believe stuff that they wouldn't otherwise if only they knew better, kind of mentality. And that's that line I love that is so simple. The visitor knows, the person visited believes. And it's really a fantastic sort of way to really talk about that first moment as he talks about it. And as he goes through, it's that thing to keep considering, because that thing is important. And there's a twist he makes on it where it's the modern person, the modern is someone who believes that others believe. Because as I was talking earlier with my kids, or as I was saying before, the shift of the modern is to be under the misapprehension, because they believe as well. They believe that the child believes it's real, but it doesn't work like that necessarily, that the encounter that is being created is made by the person doing the encounter. And this is the Gold Coast reference he's going to make this is the big thing to take from it. It's not that the modern knows better. It's that the modern has the belief that the other team believes. That's the creation of what he's talking about. And it's a very different beast.
I actually, can we just stop on this for a brief second? It's not super critical to this, but it's sort of it's a trivial detail I'm kind of interested in. The visitor knows the person visited believes. I have not been able to find that in Montaigne. And I'm wondering, is that a Latour one? And is the Montaigne...
I mean, it's not a quote.
Yeah, the quote in question I thought was like people believe because of authority. Quote. Yeah, because I thought the Montaigne essay was the one in which it was said that like people have their religious beliefs due to external authority, and it's something like that, which has essentially the same meaning here. It's a result of relationships among people. The visitor knows the person. I wasn't clear if that was supposed to be a quote from Montaigne or a reference.
Like, I mean, it's not a quote for sure. He's just saying that Montaigne was someone who really built this up and talked about it, because for Montaigne, and I think since, the point is that belief is not a state of mind, that people don't believe like as a thing. Oh, I believe, and that's just in their heads. Beliefs are in their heads. That's not really what it is, that beliefs are extracted or brought forth by the relationships of people.
No, I thought it was more like belief is still a state of mind in the sense of it is a content of something that is intellectual, but that content isn't generated by reasoning. The content is generated by the pressure of the social situation in which you exist. And so like the person who's like a Christian all their lives, they aren't so because they reasoned their way there. They are so because this is the thing that was presented to them as a thing they ought to declare as their belief, quote unquote, when asked in the society in which they live, which is of course reinforced by authority fundamentally, but also is then also the result of a specific relationship with the people around them. That's sort of what I took that to be. I don't know if Montaigne had that particular like attitude towards it. Again, it's trivial with respect to this. It isn't
actually. It's pretty important to this. So when Montaigne wrote about the cannibals of Brazil, because this is what the Europeans called them, the barbarians and cannibals of Brazil, which, by the way, Castro's book, Cannibal Metaphysics, directly references all of that. My understanding, and it has been, we'll just say a little bit since I picked up any Montaigne, but the whole point was sort of, why do you believe you are over the top of them? Why do you believe you are superior? Why do you believe you are artificial and they exist in a natural state, that they are closer to animals, but you've created so much more? Why are you civilized, but they're natural? And that reflection for him and Montaigne's point, and again, this is, I think, what Latour is saying here, the crucial part is that the position of the observer is what sets it for Montaigne. That the relationship of what belief is Montaigne's argument, I think, at the base layer. And that's what we're talking about. Belief is not a state of mind, because it's like, oh, this is their beliefs. That's bullshit. That's an old hat. Instead, it's the result of relationships amongst people. The visitor knows, but the person visited believes. And that they knew. That's like, conversely, the visitor knew. The person visited makes him understand he only thought he knew. That's the back and forth. That's what Montaigne's essay is kind of doing. And that's also how again, it's been a while. Yeah. But like, that's really what it's about. It's, people would say, and it's one of the things that Montaigne talked about, like people would say, I went to Brazil and I wandered over and you wouldn't believe the dumb shit they believed, basically, is what they'd say. They did this crazy thing. Oh my God, they did this crazy thing. And it's like, oh my God, they believe that's a good idea.
I like that
That's
Jimbo.
kind of how it worked.
Yeah, I like that Jimbo in chat brought up Moby Dick. So they say, or not Jimbo, sorry, Autism Rat. Nice name. Moby Dick might be a good analogy because Ishmael isn't particularly religious, but still views Queequeg as doing something basically illegitimate.
Yes.
Um,
Oh no, it's a fantastic example.
Well, it's actually a large part of what the book's about. One of the things that nobody ever talks about, because every film version of Moby Dick, which is the only version of Moby Dick 90% of people watch and are bored by, doesn't actually bother to actually
They think it's
depict
about
that.
the hunting of the whale.
And it is sort of, but also no. It's more like the hunting of the whales about everything else. And the ship that they embark on is adorned with like cannibal artifacts. It has like that exact aesthetic about it. There's a particular point about the bones and spikes and things that are.
And do remember, at the time that was written,
yeah.
Cannibal was slang for people who live in Brazil. Like that.
He has a he has a BBC level of diversity on his harpooner squad.
No, very much. I'm just saying, like,
yeah.
Cannibal was shorthand. Like, savage was another term, but cannibal was like their shorthand for people from Brazil, which is kind of amazing. Like, when you start thinking about it for 2 seconds, like, oh, great. But again, so
or islanders or whoever, like it just all sorts of people that would be sent to El Salvador.
To go back to Montaigne. So Montaigne wrote about these cannibals, the Brazilians brought to, I think, France. I can't remember where the port was, Europe in some capacity. And he wrote, as everyone was like, look at what the cannibals do. Here's what they believe. Yeah. In turn, these cannibals or savages were stunned by the inequality they saw. Like just the life people led. It wasn't like, oh my God, you have magical toys, like that kind of thing. It was more like, what? Why are they starving? Why do you live like this? You believe this is good? Again, the Brazilians visiting also viewed what Europeans believed as being insane and obviously silly, and they knew better. This is the position that he's taking here, and its belief is not a state of mind, but the result of relationships amongst people. And that's where he continues. I kind of want to jump to the next paragraph because he dives into it really quick. But that's the base of this. It all starts on the west coast of Africa, somewhere in Guinea, with the Portuguese. Covered with amulets of the saints and the virgins themselves, they accuse the Gold Coast blacks of worshipping fetishes. When the Portuguese demanded an answer to their first question, quote, have you made these stone, clay, and wood idols you honor with your own hands? The Guineas replied at once that they indeed had. Ordered to answer the second question, are these stone, clay, and wood idols true divinities? The blacks answered, yes. With utmost innocence, yes, of course. Otherwise, they would not have made them with their own hands. I fucking love it. The Portuguese, shocked but scrupulous, not wanting to condemn without proof, gave the Africans one last chance. You can't say both you've made your own fetishes and that they are true divinities. You have to choose. It's either one or the other. Unless, they went on indignantly, you really have no brains. You're as oblivious to the principle of contradiction as you are to the sin of idolatry. Stunned silence from the blacks, who failed to see any contradiction, proved how many rungs separated them from full and complete humanity. Bombarded with questions, they persisted in repeating that they did make their own idols, and therefore these were indeed true divinities. Confronted with such blatant bad faith, the Portuguese could only respond with jeers, derision, and disgust. This is the encounter that he's talking about. Wow, they believe this? You believe this? Don't you know better? We know better. That's the encounter he's talking about, the contingency of belief, effectively, that creates these sort of fairy objects, factishes, whatever we're going to be going through. But the creation of fetishes in that encounter, the disbelief and belief meeting, kind of in humans, more or less. To designate the aberration of the coastal Guinea blacks and to cover up their own misunderstanding, the Portuguese, very Catholic explorers, conquerors, and to a certain extent slave traders as well, are thought to have used adjective feitio, from feitio, the past principle of the Portuguese verb to do, to make, As a noun, it means form, figure.
Gengaros tipped $3.33.
1 sec.
My brother gave me The Old Man and the Sea to read as a kid and told me Saddam Hussein's favorite book.
Old Man in the Sea. Gingaros was given Old Man in the Sea to read. Was told it was Saddam Hussein's favorite book. Was it? I actually think that might be true.
There's a really funny story that was actually featured in The Dark Forest, the second Three Body Problem book. That's actually based on a real rumor. I don't know if I've mentioned this before, but one of the characters meets with what is heavily implied to be a dying Osama bin Laden in his tent, and he brings him a 3-volume set of the Foundation trilogy by Isaac Asimov. And apparently he was a big Asimov fan in college. Actually, that's apparently a thing. And what's really funny is that apparently when you translate Foundation into Arabic, you get Al Qaeda. So it's like,
yeah, the base.
Yeah,
That's Al Qaeda means the base.
yeah.
It's funny because Old Man in the Sea is a very interesting. It's one of my favorite, like, I don't know, novels. I very much adore the entire thing.
Old Man in the Hole.
Old Man in the Sea.
I know.
The moral of the story is don't be poor, basically. Or, hey, if you're poor, you're going to be fucked forever. Enjoy it. It's a tale of like how basically poverty creates itself. That's how I take it.
Wikipedia does mention that it was Saddam Hussein's, or the hang on, let's see here.
That's funny. I didn't find a thing for it.
According to the CIA, it was a favorite book of
Fine,
Saddam
so that's
Hussein.
not true then. The CIA, do they have a webpage where they post
I'm going to find the link
favorite books?
I'm going to find the quote in a second. According to the CIA, it was a favorite book of Saddam Hussein, who saw himself like Santiago as, quote, struggling against overwhelming odds with courage, perseverance, and dignity, unquote.
And failing in the end. I mean, that's how the book ends. It's not a pick me up.
This is an actual thing. Let me send this to you.
It's not a pick me up book. You don't read it if you want a good time.
Although if you're just trying to look smart, it's very short.
We got a super chat. I feel like I had just gonna ban someone who's a racist. Thank you for the couple bucks. You can eat shit forever. Go away. Just to mention, the idea that there is no word for maintenance in African means you're really fucking stupid. Because African isn't a language.
I don't think you actually speak African, Brooks.
I don't think anyone in the world speaks African. Just like no one in the world speaks North American or European or Asian.
Because I do speak European.
Fucking asshole. That's fucking amazing. I'm not even gonna like tolerate it. Like, that's insane. That's fucking awful. Africa is not a country, a culture. It is a continent. And the fact that we totalize it is problematic as a thing. There are dozens of languages, and they absolutely have words for maintenance, you fucking morons. Jesus Christ. It's like, what the fuck, man? What the fuck? Jesus Christ.
What a weird...
I know there's hundreds of language. I'm just like off the top of my head, I can name like 3.
No, this is
what? African? Are you looking up African language?
No, I was just curious if this was like a meme, because that phrasing is very strange. And apparently this is actually a whole thing that people spread.
What is?
Gengaros tipped $3.33. I can name every country in Africa in under 2 minutes. I did the test. Average American thinks Africa is one country and can't find it on a map.
Gangros is talking shit of Americans, which that in that case was deserved. Donos aren't being shown. You won't get them. I don't know how to fix that. I'll figure it out someday. Not tonight. Thank you for the 333, King Gross. Very nice. What? Don't look at me like that.
Oh, I'm not looking at you like anything. My head hurts.
It's very tiring. People are very tiring. What were you looking up? Sorry. This
is
thing?
A weird. I'll show you. It's a weird ass. I sent it to you in DMs. It's a weird ass conversation that seems to have the exact same content by Africa Voice. A guy called Frank Zanu Ajasegbey? I can't pronounce his last name. Very strange. I don't know.
There's no language that has...
Saying there's no single African language that has a direct word for maintenance, which is different from saying that there is no word for maintenance. It means that the word maintenance in English doesn't have a directly corresponding term, which is, by the way,
it does.
It
would absolutely. It's silly. That's just stupid.
Probably, but it would just be a matter of like how you get to the exact same concept, sort of like how English absorbs a lot of French words, right? Like we have terms.
No, I'm just going to simply say it's a lie, and he's full of shit, and I don't care.
Yeah. I mean, probably in terms of how that's being phrased, but I mean, the idea that there's not like a direct corresponding term is
there is absolutely
like,
direct corresponding terms. There are absolutely direct corresponding terms, not just because of
no,
the fact that it'd be silly otherwise.
No, hang on, you're getting a little bit excited there, but I'm not saying something that wild. What I'm saying is that like when you have very particular senses of particular words in English, oftentimes there isn't like a direct immediately corresponding thing that has the same etymological history, therefore it doesn't have like, it's not cut at the same joints, but you still are able to talk about the exact same thing, you just do it differently. So right, because like it's a different language, you do it differently.
I understand what you're saying. What I'm saying is like after 200 to 300 years of subjugation with multiple English or European languages, one, you would see that carried over, and that would end up being in the languages. But two,
no, they're modern countries. They have maintenance. It's just a question of
they have maintenance. Like, do you think they only go like, hey, in Zulu, for example, they might go, hey, get the fuck. Oh, what's the guy that keeps my shower going? The fuck. I don't know.
Well, depending on where it is, they might likely just use a French word even for the same reasons, right? Like it's sort of like how again just English steals words willy-nilly. Why? Because there wasn't an organic term that came from English for the thing. We adopted something that found wide purchase and therefore just used it. And I think it's the same thing there. Hell, we've got terms that come from African languages in the same way. It's the same thing.
I hate this so much.
Yeah.
All right, I'll end up.
Yeah, to make a blanket claim about entire class of languages is bizarre. And I mean, like, here's the thing. Even this quote, which I have a suspicion is going to go somewhere extremely racist. It says there is no single African language that has a direct word for maintenance. That doesn't mean there is not a direct reference for maintenance that may use multiple words that may be used interchangeably with other concepts, but then in practice means essentially the same thing, and so on and so forth. Like, which in English you have tons of examples of. Like, anytime you have a synonym, you have a case of that happening, right? So, or not a synonym, a homonym.
Yeah, I hate this a lot.
Okay.
Russia wouldn't have a word for maintenance then in the same exact meaning and way.
Well, they would. They would have a concept of maintenance. It would just be when you articulate it in language, you might use two words, or it might use a word that also has like a different application elsewhere. And it might just not like directly map onto the concept, but the concept is directly mapped onto by a particular use of particular words. Like the statement was there was no concept. That's a weird cognitive claim about an entire group of languages. Saying that a language doesn't have a corresponding term or a directly corresponding term, that's very common. That's the case for virtually all European languages compared to each other as well. So it's like when you compare it, translating French to English is difficult for this reason too.
I have the guy who you sent me. I'm not going to repeat his name, but the guy you sent me,
I don't know who he is.
has another podcast that is titled, he's a black man from Africa.
Yeah.
The title of the podcast, White Supremacy Doesn't Exist.
Good.
So there you go.
Glad that's. I was nervous.
So that's who this is. That's who these people are, and that's who is that thing is.
There you go.
Like, awful, just awful.
Yeah, they suck.
Of course it is. Fuck.
Well, of course, why would you bother to highlight that in that context, in that conversation, unless you were doing it for that reason? I'm not saying this isn't bullshit. I'm just saying the sentence by itself.
That's how it works. That's how this always works. It's how it has always worked. Is you say something that's like, oh fuck, they don't, and it sounds like plausible to people who think Africa's a country. Why did French intellectuals try to legalize? This is one of those stupid people now too. They didn't do that, so good job. That never happened. We've got all these trolls already. It's fantastic. Feels good.
I think they're getting under your skin a little bit.
That last one did, because it's one of those things like, this is just dumb shit. But that last one where it's like asking that innocent question and it's formulated very well, where people who are too stupid to know Africa is not a language will go, really? And then they'll be seeing this black guy from Africa say that this is the case. I thought you were talking about the pedophile one, but okay. No, the pedophile one is stupid. There's no point as a thing.
That one's more understandable if you've been misreading shit. A lot of
yeah, but they don't care about that. Like it's a thing that's easy to dismiss.
Yeah.
It's because people also don't care about.
If you are sincerely of the opinion that in all of the continent of Africa there are not languages that have a concept of the repair of objects, this book being written for adults is too advanced for you. Which is saying something, because it's really freaking easy compared to most of the stuff we deal with.
Yeah, we could find some difficult things. To continue with Latour, though, the unique collision that he's talking about between the people of New Guinea and the conquistadors, the Spanish conquerors that came in, the Catholics, the way that they existed and how it operated was they had different ways of dealing with the creation of these objects, how these objects works and what they were. And that difference is what created this sort of odd interaction that allowed one side to believe, well, they believe, and the other side to believe, what do you believe? As a thing. So to continue, to designate the aberration of the coastal Guinea blacks and to cover up their own misunderstanding. The Portuguese, did I already read that one? No,
you're good.
I was
keep
getting
going,
through
keep
it.
going.
Are thought to have used the adjective fatio, from fato, the past participle of the Portuguese verb to do and to make. As a noun, it means form, figure, configuration, but as an adjective, artificial, fabricated, factitious, and finally, enchanted. Right from the start, the word's etymology refused, like the blacks, to choose between what is shaped by work and what is artificial. This refusal, this hesitation, induced fascination and brought on spells. Even though all etymological dictionaries agree on the origins of the term, Charles de Brasses, who invented the word fetishism, the French fetichisme, in 1760, linked its origins with fatum, or destiny, the source of the French noun
good word
fée.
that's been ruined.
What word? Oh, destiny? Yeah, that's fair. And of the adjective form in the noun phrase objet fée, or fairy object, also of the English adjective fée. To read the quote, the blacks from the west coast of Africa, and even those from the interior all the way up to Nubia, along the Egyptian border, worship certain divinities that the Europeans call fetishes, a term devised by our traders from Senegal, based on the Portuguese word fetiço, that is to say, a fairy object, an enchanted, divine, or oracular object, from the Latin root fatum, phantom, fairy. Whatever root we may prefer, the either-or choice remains the one on which the Portuguese insisted and the blacks rejected. Quote, who is speaking in the oracle? Is it the human being or the fairy object itself? Is the divinity real or artificial? Both, the defendants reply at once, since they are unable to grasp the difference. You have to choose, say the conquerors without further hesitation. The two roots of the word indicate rather well the ambiguity surrounding an object that talks, that is fabricated, or, to blend both meanings into single expression, an object that provokes talk. Yes, the fetish is a talk maker. Too bad the Africans did not return the compliment. It would have been nice to see them ask the Portuguese dealers if their own amulets of the Virgin had been made by hand or had fallen directly out of the sky. Oh, they were carefully crafted and engraved by our goldsmiths, they would have answered proudly. Oh, so they are sacred, the blacks would have asked. Of course they are. They are solemnly blessed by the Archbishop in Nossa Senhora de Remedios Church, in the presence of the king. So, if you recognize both the working of gold and silver in the smith's crucible, the sacred character of your icons, why are you accusing us of contradiction when we're saying the same thing? What's good for the goose is good for the gander. Sacrilege! No one can confuse idols to be smashed with icons to be prayed to, Portuguese would have answered, indignant all over again in the face of such impudence. So that line in there, the fetishes are talk makers. To go back to the way that belief, thinking, interaction happens, again, Latour comes from my very happy sort of background and the people I like. The objects aren't necessarily imbued with anything. That's not really the setup. But it's also that people don't necessarily believe. Instead, you must be thinking of the interaction of things. And fetishes, by the way that they exist, how they work, and how they operate, they evoke talk. They pull forth feelings and ideas and talk. They are talk makers. And I really like that phrasing of it because it's something that provokes talk. I've always enjoyed that. And it's such a fun little way to consider it.
Well, it doesn't just provoke talk. It also, when it says talk maker, it's not just, he's not just talking, I keep saying it when I'm talking about Latour. He's not just talking about the fact that it provokes humans to talk. It's also that it engages in discourse with humans. It is
discourse, correct. Yeah.
Yes. But in life. So like later on, we're going to get to that later. He's going to make an analogy to the way in which like substances in a laboratory setting, quote unquote, talk with the scientist. And so on and so forth. They make talk in that way, not in the sense that they provoke discussion, although of course they do, but in the sense that the interactions that take place in a laboratory setting cause discourse with the thing that is being the subject of a test, such that it then speaks to a thing that sort of goes on and on this whole chain of interactions. Eventually, at a certain point, the marble, as it were, is kind of lost in the shuffle, and we're now talking about the results of experiment is that they have an independence, almost like a personage apart from the scientist who's acting on it. That's sort of where, yeah,
it's the fetishes and the ones they're talking about, but they went through a few earlier, where they have complexity that allows them to sort of have evocative speech come from them, or divine purpose come from them, the same way that again he uses and turns it back on the Catholics, but the idea of icons that command people to do things is not unheard of in the Catholic religion. It's the same thing. It's the thing that these things do is to talk, to evoke talk, to bring about such things, and to have that that element is core to it. And it's a really great sort of twist on it to bring it back around.
Should we press on?
Yeah. Still, we can bet that they would have called upon a theologian to get them out of the predicament into which they had been thrown by the merest hint of symmetrical anthropology. But they would have needed a subtle scholar to teach them how to distinguish between latria, excessive adoration, the kind reserved for a god, and dulia, moderate adoration, as, for example, of the Virgin Mary. Pious images, the theologian would have atoned, are nothing in and of themselves. They simply serve to remind us of the model that is the only legitimate object of worship. Your monstrous idols, on the other hand, are supposed to be divinities themselves from what you say, and yet you impudently admit that you've made them yourselves from scratch. Why should he jeopardize his reputation in a theological discussion with mere natives anyway? Ashamed of equivocating in the grip of a holy zeal, the theologian would have toppled the idols, burned the fetishes, then consecrated the true image of the suffering Christ and his mother, Holy Mother inside the disinfected temples. Even without the help of this imaginary dialogue, we can see perfectly well that what we have here is not a contrast between idolatrous Gold Coast blacks and image-free Portuguese visitors. We see one group of people covered with amulets scoffing at another group of people covered with amulets. We do not have iconophiles on one side and iconoclasts on the other, but iconodules on both sides, one side being made of selective iconoclasts. Yet the misunderstanding persisted because each side, acting on its own terms, refused to choose. The Portuguese refused to hesitate between true objects of piety and sinister masks covered with sacrificial blood and grease. On the Gold Coast, every Portuguese suddenly displayed the fervent indignation Moses expressed against the golden calf. Quote, "Idols have mouths but never speak, eyes but never see, ears but never hear." The Guineans, on their side, could not see any obvious difference between the idols that had been brought down and the icon erected in its place. Relativists, before the term was invented, they thought what the Portuguese were doing was the same thing that they did. And it was precisely the failure to distinguish this lack of comprehension that condemned them in the eyes of the Portuguese. These savages could not even tell the difference between latry and dulia, between their own fetishes and the holy icon of the invaders. They refused to grasp the extent of the gulf that separated human construction from an artifact from the divine reality of what no human has ever constructed. Even the difference between immanence and transcendence seemed to be beyond them. How could the Portuguese fail to see them as primitives, and fetishism as a primitive religion? All the more so, since the savages have been diabolically persistent in this error. 3 centuries later, in contemporary Rio de Janeiro, black and Portuguese mestizos stubbornly maintain both that their divinities are made, fabricated, seeded, and that as a result they are real. The anthropologist Patricia de Aquino has collected and translated accounts by, I'm not going to be able to pronounce this correctly, I apologize, Candomblé initiates. Feel like it's going to be Candomblé. Brazil has like a nice little like Portuguese tang to it.
I don't think it's candomblé, so yeah.
That's fair. Quote, "I was shaved, initiated, in Salvador Forosala, but I had to seat Yewa, who asked, through divination, to be seated, installed, made, and fabricated. And Mother Aninha, his initiator, sent me to Rio because at the time Yewa was already an endangered Orisa, so to speak. There were many who no longer knew the Oro, the Yoruba term for the word of words and rights, of Yewa. I am from Oba. Oba is almost dead already because no one knows how to seat her. No one knows the craft, so I came here to this candomblé because I was shaved here. And they are not going to forget the awo, the Yoruba term for secrets, for making her." This is from that. "The anti-fetishist slumbering within us cannot stand the brazenness of such statements. Hide the construction process, the craft, That's terrible writing. Do you have a weird version of this book?
The phaser?
That can't be right.
That's what it says there, the phaser.
It's terrible. It can't be right.
Fuck.
Doesn't matter. The craft, the phaser that we cannot see, I don't care. Whatever, it doesn't matter. How can you so sanctimoniously admit that you have to make, fabricate, seat, situate, construct these divinities that grip you and yet remain out of reach? Are you so unaware of the difference between making what comes from yourselves and receiving what comes from elsewhere? No matter where they landed, the Portuguese, struck by the same sort of impudence, had to understand fetishism by liking it either to naivete or cynicism. If you admit
phaser apparently means to make.
Oh God, of course it does. We just went through that 2 pages ago.
I think it means intention here. Because I'm looking at a thing on Reddit just talking about different Portuguese terms, and it's asking like, so does you faço mean I'll do it in a couple of hours, and you ferry mean I'll do it in the same time in the future? And the response is I'm going to imply future intentions. So I think it's intentions. So like hide your intentions, but yeah. I'm probably wrong. I don't go Portuguese, but that's what I think.
The craft, the intentions that we cannot see. The sentence I think is clear without it, but adding that in is fine. the point of this section is like, as they went, the Spanish have their process for creating iconography, but they do not believe the iconography itself is what is divine. They have a separation. They have a step that they take where the icons, well made by craftsmen, must be blessed in certain positions, but also we are aware that they're not literally dropped by God to us, but we worship them as though they were. But we are aware of that distance between that thing and God. But what you're doing is you're skipping a step. You're taking the thing you're making and saying God made it. What, did he make it through you? We can't, like that kind of thing. Yeah. And they can't mentally handle the idea that God works through people, even though the Bible is supposed to literally be that. It's okay.
Well, I think more specifically though, like the working through, that's taken to be an artifact of the working through that lacks any kind of enchantment by itself, and it's sort of taken on faith for the reasons. This is where this will come in later. That process was in the past. Now we're acting rationally with the things derived from this beyond at some previous state. Now we are operating differently, and that's kind of the implication, because the analogy would be based on this misread of what an idol maker in one of these cultures is doing, is that this person is receiving an active revelation from this little model that they made, but that's not what that is, and that's not the relationship that is in the terms of this. For example, through divination, who asked through divination to be seed installed. It's not the same kind of thing as what is being implied by the Bible was God breathed in some sense. It's similar but different.
Yeah.
There's that tense difference where it's like, yeah. The thing isn't sacred. It's a vessel recording something that's sacred that is supposed to be sort of immune to this whole dilemma because it's operating at a higher level of existence or something, or in the realm of ideas or whatever.
And that's this is the twist. So the line he says, no matter where they landed, they're struck by the same sort of impudence, had to understand fetishism by liking it to either naivete or cynicism. If you admit you fabricate your own fetishes yourselves, you must then acknowledge that you pull their strings as a puppeteer would. The whole thing is engineered to impress others through disguising itself. Manipulators of popular beliefs, you then join the whole crowd of priests and falsifiers who, according to anti-clerics, make up the long history of religion. Or else, if you let your own marionettes take you by surprise and you start believing in the airs that they, or rather you, put on, this proves such a degree of naivete that you are condemned to join the eternally credulous and hoodwinked masses who make up, again, according to lucid observers, the gullible rabble of the history of religions. I love this phrasing. This is just like baseline. It's a very similar critique to a lot of other works that I've gone over and that I know you have too. But it's that idea at the base of it. The icons that the Catholic Church has, no one would ever say that they were divinely inspired or created, that God made them directly. And that distance separates them. But then the ability for anyone who's made these things or is part of that process, you could become part of the hoodwinked masses, the silly, stupid people who believe that they're very much real and that God made them directly, and that those put you in a position of being controlled and irrational. And that's the thing that they play with. And that's
not just believing that God made them directly. It's there's not even the mystery of it being produced by a third party. You've literally hewn the thing yourself out of materials that you found. It's like, yeah. Yeah. Because it's yeah.
From the mouths of the Fontenelles, the Voltaires, the Feuerbachs of the world, the same either-or alternative keeps spewing forth. Either you are cynically pulling the strings, or else you are being had. This is like just mentioning a little critique of ideology book we've sort of talked about recently. Or even more naively, either you built it, or else it's real. Such a great line. And the shaven adepts of the candomblé persist gently. I am from Dada, but since no one knows how to fabricate Dada, we give to Sango or Osala so that they will take over the person's head. Whereas the initiates are designating something that is neither completely autonomous nor completely constructed. The notion of belief splits apart their delicate operation, the fragile bridge connecting fetish and fact, and allows the moderns to see all other people as naive believers, skillful manipulators, or self-deluding cynics. Yes, the moderns refuse to listen to the idols. They split them apart like coconuts, and from each half they take two forms of dupery. You can deceive others, and you can deceive yourself. Moderns believe in belief in order to understand others. Initiates do not believe in belief either to understand others or to understand themselves. Can we recover their way of thinking for our own use? I adore that line. And this is where we start talking about like how this plays into where I said I might have issues with the idea that it's not about facts. It's like, well, it's belief, because these things kind of come on from this. It's knowledge, belief, knowing something versus the belief of something, how a thing's made, the awareness of that process, and also the proper position and distance from the things. All these things that come together. The way that the initiates, as they talk about it, they behave much more like children. And that puts them in the position where we view them as dumber, as simpler, as stupider, from the modern perspective. Because from the modern perspective, when the child says, one day he makes, tapes together. My son did this the other day. He made, with a bunch of Legos, he made a Pokemon character for Goat Simulator. They mash things up. But then the next day he carried it with him like his best friend. And it talked to him, and it did stuff with him. And we have this sort of thing when we look at that. Do you think he's too stupid to know he made it the day before? Or do you think he's just purely pretending? And that idea is kind of the thing that separates it, because the answer is, for him and for the initiates, the answer is both. He made it, and it exists, and it does these things, and it behaves this way. It's both. And it's not that he is a puppeteer or a puppet. It's a completely different way of dealing with it.
Someone brought up Marx's notion of fetishism earlier, and it's going to come up in here again, and he's going to make a general reference to certain things that I don't want to like get ahead of ourselves. We're going to refer to like things like the economy and so on and so forth. And it's interesting, as just a point of quick comparison, that when we talk about the economy, despite this thing being something wholly fabricated by human hands, we talk about it as if it has rules and a will and a behavior that is independent of human intervention and that resists human intervention, as if it's a person in the room that is actively being contended with, that you're in dialogue with. It acts in the same way as like with the same level of autonomy and like sort of resistance to control as like individuals and states and like natural forces, which we also talk about in the same way, and so on and so forth. That's probably sort of a good because again, like the emphasis here, and going back to the prologue, isn't on actually science is bullshit, and like obviously there's like you're just doing the same thing as when people are carving idols. The point is that there is something in common in the form of what you're doing, very significantly, relevantly in common, that this notion of belief makes you blind to, and you lose sight of the very specific manufactured history of the thing in a way that actually the person who makes the idol that supposedly like has a will and a person and so on and so forth doesn't actually lose sight of. When they answer, like, does the human or the idol speak? They say both. They say both, like with a clarity. That's an idea they have in their head. They already understand what it is that they're doing. When the scientist then refers to the activity and the significations of stuff that stuff in his lab does, the fact that he set up the experiment in the first place is sort of lost in the equation, or that this is building off of an experiment that was set up before, or premises that were set up before, or whatever. And afterwards, it ends up factoring into the conversation, still positively with practically positive results and useful results, but it ends up factoring into the conversation going forward as if it had its own autonomy from things, sort of like an idol that asks through divination to be made, in kind of that way. And it's, yeah. No?
Well, I won't say no. I mean, Christ, if Latour was here, we could probably ask him. But
well, I mean, he could be. If you want to give me 5 minutes, I can carve one up.
Yeah. Well, I think that's, for me, the closer I would probably talk about it, because
yeah.
If anyone's ever actually had someone who they were close to pass, and they have a gravestone, or you kind of have that time where you're spending time with wherever they could be, or it feels like you're talking to them. There's the way that these things exist, where what talking means, or how things sort of communicate. That experience of doing such a thing. The question would be, I think, what belief does and how belief works for the moderns, because that's the thing that Bruno Latour is sort of, in my mind, talking about, the thing that we're sort of failing, because the idea that there is a dichotomy, and as he talks about it, he says either you built it or it's real, which I love, or you're pulling the strings or else you're being had, as the sort of two sides of things, when the reality is you can both be making the thing and be part of it, because belief creates that distance. It creates that secondary bit of sort of built-in cynicism or built-in naivete, when we're not talking about something that is entirely autonomous. That's, I think, his argument, that the fetishes that the initiates are using, it's not that they're autonomous. The icons in Catholicism are autonomous from its creator. They're autonomous from people. They're also autonomous from God. They're created and made separately, explicitly, so they can be references to this larger thing. So when we're talking about like what belief does, the idea of belief, not believing, but the concept that people can believe in something, presumes a sort of weird constellation of interactions that fuck us up when it comes to how to treat objects that are created or manufactured or whatever it is. And it puts us in a really weird place of mistaking the separation of things, or creating the separation of things in the idea of belief itself. Yeah. They split things. That's what belief does. Belief splits things into, you're aware of it or you're not. It
doesn't
breaks us apart.
It doesn't just split things. It also it determines a specific relationship with things, in which the human subject is not being constituted by them as well. It's not just that there's I phrased that badly. It's not just that there's now a dichotomy that has to be sort of decided on when any of these elements are sort of like being presented. It's like, is this thing an insignificant piece of rock, or is this thing something of like heavy metaphysical / spiritual / whatever significance that actually does things, or does it signify something of that sort, or is there a substantial sacredness about the thing, maybe, if you're talking about something that's maybe like forbidden or profane or whatever.
Right, but by creating the space of the fetish, or even talking about it as such, basically it puts you in a position of saying some things are fetishes, or that there is a category of belief that is separate from other types of knowledge. When I think what he's more arguing is the idea that the creation of things and their process and their existence is very much built in, and it's not about naively believing in things you're constructed. But that would be the rationalist. Well, I'm not stupid enough to do that. Now, let me tell you about all of the rules of physics that tell me that I'm absolutely correct and what I believe is right. That separation is the hidden fetishism, or the way that we end up doing the same act, but we refuse and we...
no, I'm operating just on chapter 1 of the book. What I took him to be saying was something a little bit, slightly different. Not that it's that like the enlightened Modun, who thinks that he's smarter than someone who believes in the personhood and the aliveness of a sort of fetish object of an idol or something, because of the rules of physics. Like we
Well,
like
that's not literally what I said, but okay.
Okay. Well, I'm not like, it's not. I wasn't like trying to reproduce that exactly.
Right.
It's not so much that the reliance on quote unquote laws of physics is itself in some sense, in some relevant sense.
One second.
No
My
worries.
daughter needs to say something to me.
That's okay.
Hey, sweetheart, what's up? Hello, come here. Give Daddy a hug. Hello. How are you doing? You want to sit on me? We are going to sleep. It's time for night. No, you're gonna. It's kids exist in a place where they have more energy than any of us ever will. So they get their first wind, and then a second wind. They always end up with a third, and then collectively they get exponentially more of whatever wind is, or that thing is. By the time it goes third or fourth, it's more psychotic and frenzied and shorter and burns brighter every time. This is a thirdish. She's walking around with a magic wand. Oh no, that's one of Daddy's lights. It's really bright. Go show Dexter the magic trick. It's all right, we can continue.
You said all that like you wouldn't carry on for an additional 4 hours if I didn't tell you to pull the plug at a certain point tonight.
Oh no, I'm going. I'm set. Well, you want to keep going?
Oh no, we're going. We're still going. We're only at an hour and a half. We're going till at least 11:30. I was expecting midnight.
Oh, we're going way longer than that. We're gonna be up till 4. We're doing the whole book tonight. We're gonna 11:30.
You're so funny. You're hilarious. Anyways, the point is not that there's like an equivocation between reliance on products of science, even theoretical products of science, and superstition, or something like superstition. Okay. The point is that the notion of superstition itself disposes us to an erroneous read of what's taking place with people who are doing this socially and with ourselves as well. Because I think superstition is actually a great example of this, because it relies upon exactly that kind of notion of belief in order to make sense as we sort of use it. Where it's like I
can get with that. There's the old.
Because like here's the thing. Because like
Zizek tells the story of the famous physicist, and it's not a true story, so it doesn't matter to say his name. But the idea is he had a barn, and on that barn he had a horseshoe on the entrance hanging upside down. And he was giving someone a tour, and they were like, "What's that?" And he goes, "Oh, that keeps evil spirits out." And they went, "What? You can't possibly believe in such a thing. You're a physicist." And he went, "No, of course I don't believe it. But I was told it would work even if I didn't." Which is a great fucking line. It's Niels Bohr joke. But it's belief as a thing and how things work, and superstition is close. But it's not quite there, because superstition is in the name, built into the self-awareness that the thing is itself not belief. Like, that's what superstition is. You're aware that it's a silly thing. Or, look, I have a superstition. I wear the same pair of socks every time I have an interview, and I've gotten every job I've gotten. It's like, what? Like, and they know it's stupid. That's like the reason it's the thing. Superstition is that. When we're talking about belief here, And this is kind of the thing I think is the core of this. And it gets into pretty quick if we want to go the next couple paragraphs. But when we're talking about kind of the nature of the fetishism, how these things come about, how people find belief, it's at the very end here that he says it. Whereas the initiates are designating something that is neither completely autonomous nor completely constructed. The notion of belief splits apart their delicate operation, the fragile bridge connecting fetish and fact, allowing moderns to see other people as naive believers. Moderns separate the thing from the belief, or as he describes it there, something autonomous and constructed, because the idea that I made something, and if I were to talk about religiously divine paintings, you see that in the way that people talk about them. Someone was inspired, or I have a muse, and then I made a thing. But that thing, that process may have been inspired, but the object itself isn't really part of that. The object is the creation. And I'm not going to think that the creation itself has power. I'm not silly. And it's that kind of thing where it's like, but the thing clearly has power. You made art. You've made powerful things that people have seen and reacted to. And it has power. And it's not autonomous, but it's also not like fully constructed, like birthed from you. And that's where the belief part comes in, the nature of how we engage with objects and creations.
In the previous stream from today, we were talking briefly about the idea of fashion.
Yeah.
This thing called fashion, which has its own autonomy, just exists out there, which governs like behavior, is taken to be just a thing that is there, that populates our world, that anchors certain practices and so on and so forth, in the exact same way as these things. What he's going to get into, which is really interesting, is that the common behavior and what really distinguishes the modern situation, quote unquote, because he doesn't believe there is a modern, there are moderns, quote unquote, as
We
such.
Were Never Modern is the title of one of his books.
Yeah, and he cites it a couple times in here. He references it a couple times here. But like, the move is not that, oh, we are actually doing the same thing. The move is we are doing the same kind of thing, but filtered in such a way as we are essentially constitutionally incapable of recognizing it. And what's weird about it is that we are doing it in such a way that actually runs directly afoul of this notion of belief. And we talk about this all the time. We talk about even the distinction between theory and practice kind of bears this out, where we recognize that there is a fundamental distinction between what we quote unquote believe about things, propositions that we will give assent to, and so on and so forth, and then how the sausage is actually made. That's like a really superficial version of that. But we keep these things separate, and in that way we're able to carry on with practice that directly contradicts the propositions we assent to, and so on and so forth.
Let me try to shift this around because
please,
because it's an interesting thought direction, and it, by the way, it would be worth pursuing, because I do not believe that's what Latour is doing.
Okay,
it'd be worth pursuing. Latour is particular because for him, he wants people to understand that there is no break between that which is created and the meaning that it has. That all of his books. This is Laboratory Life. This is his book on Louis Pasteur. He talks about Pasteur. I think one of the people in our chat, I believe, is reading it. They're sending me notes. They're all excited about it. It's a phenomenal book. But one of the things Louis Pasteur does that's really weird is he talks about the fermentation process that he made as being constructed in a lab. And this is Laboratory Life is about this. We have these facts. We did these experiments in a lab, but they were done by people. The lab was made by people. They were all constructed. People were integral, the entire fucking thing. But somehow we have this weird divide where we talk about stuff that was made and then the people who made them as though we extricate that process.
Yes.
And what we're talking about with fetish here in the Factish and this setup is the colonial religious nature of that sort of divide, where it's like, don't you understand that you aren't the thing you made, and also the thing you made is not powerful itself, that you give it power? Aren't you silly? How silly are you to not have this modern understanding of that process? And that is very much the same mentality that you have when you talk about people like Pasteur or scientism, or anyone who does that thing where they're like, look, it's made, but it's not made by a person. Well, sure, it's made by a person, but come on, that's not where it gets the power. It's like literally that divide and that break is the thing that makes moderns to him as he's talking about it. And that's to continue, because I think I want to keep going if you're up for it.
Yeah, go for it. I'm not tapping out yet.
Okay, good. Making sure.
Sorry, did you think I was tapping out?
I mean...
No, I was making a joke based on the fact that you would literally carry on for 7 hours.
Oh, I could carry on for much longer than 7 hours. Hey, chat, let me just see the things, if you believe Sunday was about to tap out. If I'm not alone in that, just saying. Just saying.
Chat's dead. I think they're all asleep.
Maybe they're watching Andor and fell asleep because it's so fucking boring. If we allow ourselves to learn from those who do not believe in belief, we notice that the moderns do not believe in it any more than the coastal blacks did. The whites may have accused the savages of fetishism, but this did not necessarily make them naive anti-fetishists themselves. If we believed that, it would move us further from Scylla, but closer to Charybdis.
Scylla?
No, I've never actually heard that said aloud.
Scylla and Charybdis,
Yeah. If we believed that, we would save the blacks from belief, and belief would then become an accusation leveled by the whites against something they did not understand. But we would be plunging the whites into an abyss of naivete. We would have them believing that the others believe. We would be confusing whites with blacks. He's so great. What we have just done for the fetishists, we must now do for the anti-fetishists.
You're wrong. It's Scylla. It's Scylla. God damn it, you were right. Shoot.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm mad now. I'm going to see if the American pronunciation saves me. Fuck. Okay, continue.
What we have just done for the fetishists, we must now do for the anti-fetishists, and show ourselves to be as charitable toward the latter as we have been toward the former. As it happens, just as the charge of fetishism completely fails to describe the practices of coastal blacks, the claim of anti-fetishism, likewise, fails to explain the practices of the whites. Wherever they install their great fetish-smashing machines, the whites begin, once again, to produce the same sort of uncertain beings the blacks produced, and it is impossible to tell whether these beings are constructed or collected, immanent or transcendent. Let us consider, for example, everything the fetish object is capable of doing, even though it is accused of doing nothing. What is the definition of an anti-fetishist? An anti-fetishist is someone who accuses someone else of being a fetishist. And what is the content of the complaint? The fetishist is accused of being mistaken about the origin of the power in question. He's built an idol with his own hands, his own human labor, his own human fantasies, his own human powers. Yet he attributes this labor, these fantasies, these powers, to the very object that he has created. The fetish, at least according to the anti-fetishist, acts, so to speak, like an overhead projector. The image comes from the professor, who has placed a transparency on the glass over the blinding light. But what is shown seems to spring from the screen toward the audience, as if neither the professor nor the overhead projector had anything to do with it. The fascinated spectators attribute an autonomy to the image that it does not possess. Overturning fetishism thus amounts to inverting an inversion, reversing a reversal, rectifying the image, and granting the real master of the action credit for initiating it. Along the way, however, the real master has disappeared. The object, which was nothing, is now doing something. As for the origin of the action, it gets lost in a frightfully mixed-up battle of inheritance. I adore it. I adore it.
I like this book because he writes very clearly, but also elegantly, which is not like Deleuze, who writes very, very elegantly, and it's like pulling teeth.
Depends on the book.
Yes, but also significantly.
Depends on the book. He's
significantly harder across the board.
For me, he bats 50%. Some of his books are he's about half and half. Half of his books are incoherent and nightmarish, and half of his books are brilliant and easy to read. In my experience,
it's the Guattari influence. I just on a whim, I just opened up schizoanalytic cartographies. Oh my god,
Uh-huh.
Just
You don't have a background in psychoanalysis, so it's
I
gonna
don't
be
think
real
a background
difficult.
in psychoanalysis would necessarily help you just in terms of the language. I've read Freud.
You haven't read
I've-
Lacan.
Lacan's also pretty bad, but I can get Lacan easier than I can get Guattari. Dear God.
I'm gonna and I understand what you're saying. I'm just gonna let you know.
Yeah.
No one. Lacan is like a lifetime of study thing. Guattari much easier.
I'm not talking about concepts. I'm talking just in terms.
I'm talking about writing. Yeah, I have multiple of his seminars behind me, and they are fucking something else.
Okay, well maybe it's just because I actually spent like some time actually going through the frickin' why is my brain not working? The Dupin one. Help. What's the post story called again? The seminar on
The Purloined Letter.
Purloined Letter. Thank you, Jesus. So I've for a brief
That's-
period I got into the flow of that one, and I opened up
It's
Guattari.
it's literally the easiest to read Lacan thing that there is. Feel free to read his seminar on anxiety. I couldn't even make it through. And I
wonder if it's easier in French, like it's a French to English thing.
I did that. It is worse.
Okay. Apparently,
It's-
apparently Kant's like that. Kant is like brutal in German.
I buy
But
it.
relatively easy in English.
And that relatively is a relative thing for sure.
Thucydides is like that apparently.
We had a reading on our server for the Purloined Letter,
Yeah.
which is fantastic. Highly recommend it. Good reading group. Back to this though. To just talk through. He doesn't want us to sort of sit here and talk about the simple sort of, oh, we just want to go against that then.
Yeah.
Because that's not really the play here. Because anti-fetishism isn't simply like, oh, we just want fetishism. It's like, no. We want to be really, again, this is about a critique. It's critical thought. This is not just argumentative or counter thought. That's not what he's doing here. He really wants us to get back to a couple things. The content of the complaint, I think, is the brunt of it, and it's where I find a lot of my favorite bits of this. The fetishist is accused of being mistaken about the origin of the power in question. He's built an idol with his own hands, his own labor, fantasies, powers. He attributes this labor, fantasies, and powers to the object he's created. This is not Michelangelo spoke of this. It's not uncommon for artists or creators to just sort of go, I just did what was there, or I couldn't help myself but make the thing, or the thing sort of came about. Like that element, this sort of thing, the fetish of this, at least according to the anti-fetishist, acts like an overhead projector. The image comes from the professor who places a transparency on the glass, and what is shown seems to spring from the screen to the audience, as if the overhead projector had nothing to do with it. The anti-fetishist is effectively saying, you are completely forgetting the rest of this. This is an illusion. This is not the entirety of the process. You are ignoring the creation of this and where it came from. You are not separating this out into its proper process and setup. And that, as its core, to me, is... again, we're going to be getting into all of it. It's why the scientism comes in all of this.
That's the critique that's being levied at the person who thinks they are different because they are modern, because that is precisely the move that they make. And the point is not, therefore, everything's at this sort of like same lower level. The point is like, there is an entire field of these things that act in that way as these sort of presumptive persons in our world, that ought to be like analyzed as such, and our specific relationship to them and how we use them to do things ought to be understood as such. And the notion of belief that allows someone to castigate someone who, for example, carves idols and treats them in the same way that we treat all these other things, but in a more like blunt and direct way, to the perspective of the anthropologist, is like, it makes it so that we aren't even able to consider those things in their actual place.
Well, and again, when we talk about the idol talking, like being a talking thing, like an oracle, or being something that evokes such things, It's the next paragraph. He nails it, but it's again realizing that, and this is a big deal for Latour. The conquistadors who show up, they were impacted by the fetishes, and the fetishes spoke to them just as much as anyone else. Like, this is the thing that is covered up by the way that they're cynically talking. Don't you understand? They have no power. Don't you understand? They do nothing except that they're making us infuriated and that we must destroy them. Don't you understand? They don't do anything except for all the stuff they're doing. This kind of thing that gets buried through this overt secondary sort of odd narrative that's laid on top that the anti-fetishist has is, as he says, I'll just to read a little bit. As soon as the anti-fetishist unveils the idol's ineffectiveness, he in fact plunges into a contradiction from which he cannot escape. Just when the fetish is deemed to be nothing at all, it begins to act and shift everything about. It is capable, in particular, of reversing the origin of power. Better yet, since according to the anti-fetishists, the effect of the fetish is efficacious only if its creator is unaware of its origin. It must be capable of completely dissimulating its own manufacture. Thanks to the fetish, in a single wave of a magic wand, its creator can turn himself from a cynical manipulator into an ingenious dupe. Thus, even though the fetish is nothing but what a human makes of it, it nevertheless adds a little something. It inverts the origin of the action. It dissimulates the human work of manipulation. It transforms the creator into a creature. How could anyone deny the efficaciousness of an object capable of so many prodigious feats? Latour's actor network theory, where everything is effective on everything else. And it's decisively important in ways that's really hard to sort of talk about. But when it comes to, like, I don't know, any sort of diagram of things or an understanding of any ecosystem, Latour is like, actor network theory is like king of that shit. And there's a reason for it. Everything affects everything else. The conquistadors coming and being upset and being like, that idol has no power over us, except it fucking does. You guys were enraged. You burned it. You had to sacrilege. Clearly it had an impact, you fucking weirdos. But their claim that, well, you know the thing. And the beauty is on top of it. They know that it was made by the guy they're talking to. And they know that it doesn't have the power imbued in it by that guy. But still it has the power to do what it's doing. It's amazing when you talk about, like, the things it evokes. It talks what the fetish does and how it works on people who even apparently don't believe, but it clearly do. And that's like the core critique. It's so great.
There's elements of this we can probably, I kind of want to spend time on it, but we can also just jump ahead a little bit, like, for tonight. Oh
no, we're going piece by piece. There's this you don't go out of order.
No? All right.
No. He's very deliberate in how he's going about it. It's like 40 pages. It's like nothing.
Yeah. By the way, apparently, it's a bit more complicated via Scylla and Charybdis. So it looks like the ancient Greek might be Scylla, the Latin might be Scylla, the French might be Scylla, but then everybody else, including Google, says Scylla. So I'm very confused.
Well, that's pretty silly.
Not that it matters, but
I'm sorry, Skilly.
Okay. Anyways, moving on. I'll read this last little bit. But the fetish does better still, besides all these prodigious feats. It modifies the very quality of human action and work, and yet by revealing that only human action gives voice and power to objects, the critical thinker ought to invert the inverted origins of power, ending the illusion of the fetishes once and for all. Someone who naively believed he was hearing voices would then turn into a ventriloquist. Having become aware of his own double dealing, he would be reconciled with himself. Someone who believed he was dependent on divinities would notice that he is actually alone with his own inner voice, and that divinities own nothing he has not given them. Once the scales had fallen from his eyes, he would see that there was nothing to see. He would have ended his alienation, mental, religious, economic, and political, since no alien would ever again come to latch on parasitically to something he had built with his own calloused hands and his own creative spirit. Carried away by the critic's denunciation, humans would finally realize that they are sole masters in a world forever emptied of its idols. The fire that Prometheus had stolen from the gods would be stolen back from Prometheus himself by critical thinking. Fire would come from humans and from humans alone.
I love this book a lot.
Um,
Go for it.
We use the word fetish in a different key as essentially a synonym or something close to it with the word perversion. I find that kind of interesting because I'm not actually aware of the etymological history there of how that actually came about.
Freud.
It is Freud? Did Freud do that?
Yeah.
Okay, well then. Okay.
So Freud wrote about fetishes and talked of them as though they were specifically, it's a particular type of perversion. And again, Freud, lots of different things. But it was basically the non-living or sort of separated from us thing, from the the phallus for the child. You know what? Does it matter? I hate this shit so much. For him, it had to do with disavowal, and that's the thing that fetishes did. That it's about the disavowal of that the thing was created and the reality of the object, but denies that object by fetishizing it. So to just touch it into what Latour is talking about here. If I carve a statue, a fetish would be one that I carve, and then I also go, this was divinely created. And somehow I'm able to do both because I'm disavowing, because that's what Latour's critique is, like literally in this. For Freud, I'm disavowing that I made it because I had to have, or else it wouldn't be special. That would be silly. Moderns know better than that. And that's what Freud was doing. So the word for fetish kind of becomes that, where we disavow the knowledge that the thing is not arousing or the knowledge that the thing is not related to sex, but ultimately that fetish object becomes something that we want, but we're aware of it. That's why perversion ties into it.
Okay.
Freud basically does what Latour is critiquing here.
Okay. Thank you.
And that's the line he's got. It fetish works here. He doesn't want us to simply in the chat. It was Pippa who said the section is tough. Latour seems to say the Portuguese are not naive anti-fetishists. Correct. The Portuguese are not naive anti-fetishists. There's something more complicated happening. He doesn't just want us to look at the Portuguese and go, how hypocritical. Fuck those guys. Man, they suck. Because, again, hypocrisy is like the least interesting way to talk about a person. It presumes a lot of shit. Instead, let's talk about human action and work as it operates for them. By revealing that only human action gives voice and power to objects, the critical thinker ought to invert the inverted origins of power, ending the illusion of the fetishes once for all. Someone who naively believed he was hearing voices would in turn then become a ventriloquist. Having become aware of his own double dealing, he would be reconciled with himself. Someone who believed he was dependent on divinities would notice he's actually alone with his own inner voice. This thing that's happening here, we're talking about something that's very different than being just simply a naive. That's his point here. They're not just simply naive sort of in that setup way. Instead, the odd play that's happening is, he's kind of playing that there's kind of a few layers of it. They are enacting their own contradiction that is basically constitutive of modernity, you might say, or what people call the modern or the civilized. The production, and we're going to be talking about this as we go, but it's the production of sort of this odd hybrid reality where things are made, but also they are separate from us. But also it's not the maintenance of the contradiction, basically.
Yeah. It's not naivete that makes them hypocritical because they're doing the exact same thing. Because the thing that they're doing is something that they need to do. It's something that Latour values. Like it's something that we don't. It's not really. It is, I guess, optional in a sense, but it's not discardable in that way. Rather, what it is there is an imposition of a particular understanding of our relation to things, and sort of an attached cynicism that causes an entire domain of activity to kind of like exist under the radar. It's not actually I kind of like that in light of the diagram he gives later on.
No, that works.
Yeah,
because if Catholics, because we're talking about Catholics here specifically, there's a difference, and he outlines this. We just went through this where he talks about dulia and latria, the two types of worship that happen. Catholics are funny this way. Catholics have a lot of really weird dumb shit, and some of their dumb shit's really fascinating. And this dumb shit is the idea that an object or thing that is worshipped as though God, that is reserved for God. Like latria is a type of worship. Yet these very same people will have like a pendant of a saint, and they will kiss it. They'll say prayers to, Mary. They'll fucking grab their rosary. All this dumb shit that is on the surface identical. But there's a distinction there. That's not real God worship. This is this other kind of worship, a dulia, which is about venerating saints. It's not worshiping. It's not the same thing. And then kisses, we love you, please watch over me, and all. Like it's the silliness that happens, and that break, again, the dichotomy that's forced out of this, that's continually being forced when you're in this contradiction point, creates a new type of existence. And this is like Latour's entire thing, is the nature of this hybrid thing that has the contradiction, is more aware of the contradiction, but also doing all the same shit as everything else and sort of fucking with it across the board. If that makes sense. Does that make sense, as I said?
Yeah. That was good.
Because it's the Catholics are so fun for this. And that's why I think he really enjoyed picking them. We'd mix up the blacks and the whites is still one of the better lines in this chapter. But still, to continue,
let's go up to how the moderns struggle, and that's probably a good ending point because that's another chapter heading.
Yeah, I think that's fair because the complexities that I was just talking about, that odd hybrid form, that's gonna be its own discussion, and I think that's good. 11 pages of this is solid, plus the preface. I'm down.
Okay. Do you want me to read the last bit, or do you want to read? It's up to you.
I'm happy to. It's fine.
No, if you like it, okay.
Alone? Wait, just to say the last part. The fire that Prometheus had stolen from the gods would be stolen back from Prometheus himself by critical thinking. Fire would come from humans, and from humans alone. Alone? Not quite. And this is where things become complicated once again. Like an earnest lawyer who has to divide an estate where there is no will and no heir. The critical thinker never knows to whom he should restore the power that was mistakenly attributed to the fetishes. Should it be given back to the individual who is master of himself as well as of the universe, or to a society of individuals? If the answer is that one should render unto society what is society's, mastery is lost all over again. The inheritance recovered from the fetishes is dispersed amongst a cloud of legitimate heirs. Once idolatry's reversal has been reversed, once the projection of power has been projected back onto an overhead, it is not the I, the working individual, who is found at the end of the road, but a group, a multitude, a collective. Under the now dispelled fantasy of the fetish, the enlightened human being realizes that he is not really alone, but that he shares his existence with a crowd of actors. The alien he thought he was eliminating comes back in the frightfully complicated form of a social multitude. The human actor has merely exchanged one form of transcendence for another. We can see this quite well in Emil Durkheim, in whose hands that which is social seems hardly less opaque than the offending religion it explains. Marx, in his famous definition of the fetishism of commodities, illustrates how something that does nothing can still manage to proliferate. To quote Marx, there is a definite social relation between men that assumes, in their eyes, the fantastic form of a relation between things. In order, therefore, to find an analogy, we must have recourse to the mist-enveloped regions of the religious world.
Okay,
in that world,
keep in mind, your voice actually has to get deeper for the next line too, if you're going to be consistent here. So, careful.
Do you need me to go even? I can do that.
It's going to be a long couple. It's going to be a long couple of paragraphs for you, but be my guest.
Okay. In order, therefore, to find an analogy, we must have recourse to the mist-enveloped regions of the religious world. In that world, the productions of the human brain appear as independent beings endowed with life, and entering into relation both with one another and the human race. So it is in the world of commodities, with the products of men's hands. This I call the fetishism which attaches itself to the products of labor, so soon as they are produced as commodities, and which is therefore inseparable from the production of commodities. Economic anthropology attests... I can't go deeper. That's the end of it for me.
Look,
No?
I'm just glad there aren't lines talking about the coastal blacks when you're doing that, okay?
I mean, I actually have a pretty deep voice in real life. It's
it just wouldn't be taken too well by our audience, I'm just telling you.
It's my voice every day when I'm normally talking is about this tone, because it's one of those fun things. I went through puberty earlier. This happens to a lot of people, by the way. And because of that, my voice started cracking very early on. Oh. And to prevent that, I naturally made it more nasally. And it became a habit. And it's a thing that, like, literally I had to go to speech therapy. Like, this is a real thing.
This happened over the course of this stream, as a matter of fact. This happened just earlier.
And so what happens is, like, as I relax, and you'll hear it in the AO readings too, it's a thing I'm not cognizant of until I'm aware of my own voice. And at that moment, I'm able to slow down a little bit, and I'm able to shift how it handles. And this is actually what my normal voice that's quite relaxed is. It's a weird thing. It takes a lot of time. It's fucking dumb. Welcome to life. Do you want to try to analyze it, or do you want to just talk shit about my voice there, Mr. Sunday?
I thought you were asking me to analyze your voice for a second.
Dick.
Well, the fetishism of the commodity form in Marx is doing that kind of thing in an interesting way, because it's like the fact of the fetishism does things, but that's sort of taken to be a kind of a thing that we're sort of blind to. It's happening in the dark. It's supposed to be a revelation that there's a fetishization taking place. So it's like, the next line that I don't know. You didn't read the next line, did you?
That's the last paragraph we're going to do. I'm happy to do it. Economic anthropology attests to the fact that relationships among human beings, whether fetishized by way of merchandise or not, seem no more simple or transparent than those among divinities. If merchandise loses its seeming autonomy, no human regains mastery as a result, and certainly not the tireless worker. Through some strange inversion of the inversion, it appears that the fetishless world is populated by as many aliens as the world of the fetish. The inversion of the inversion leads to a universe that is as unstable as the world that was supposedly inverted by an illusory belief in fetishes. Neither anti-fetishists nor fetishists know who acts and who is mistaken about the origins of action, who is master and who is alienated or possessed. Thus, even among the moderns, the fetish, far from being drained of its efficacy, always seemed to act in such a way to shift, muddle, invert, and perturb the origins of belief, as well as the very certainty that mastery is possible. The fetish immediately regains the power that people seek to deny it. No one believes. The whites are no more anti-fetishist than the blacks are fetishist. It is just that the whites always erect idols in other people's lands, and then immediately overthrow them, multiplying the operators that disseminate the origins of the action in their own lands. Yes, the anti-fetishists are just like the fetishists. They worship idols in a rather strange manner, one that we're going to have to untangle.
This is something he's also going to get into later, but like one of the things I like about this section in particular is that it explains very nicely why, one of the reasons why we constantly find a need to replicate the products, even in like a self-regarded rationalist mode. We find we have to, like, we sort of presume, or a certain kind of person presumes, that you have to implement the exact same types of cultural things that are emergent from, like, these apparently naive religious practices or whatever, in order to maintain social stability and so on and so forth. There's a strange notion that, despite a total disregard whatsoever and a total contempt for idol worship, and I want to put quotes around everything, for idol worship and stuff like that, nonetheless, the form of society that is at the center of, that needs to be replicated in some way, or else you have some kind of chaos, or else you have some kind of, like, essential human need that is being disregarded, or else you have some kind of, like, instability being introduced or something like that. And he talks a little bit about sort of like a reactionary impulse that he wants to, like, very specifically separate himself from, because the point is not, no, we need to go back, quote unquote. First of all, he doesn't believe in a back in that way, but secondly, it's that specific attitude towards belief as still an either or that results in the solution to social problems being a retrograde. It's not that the people who believed in the idols were wrong, they were right in ways they didn't understand. We need to copy that. Yeah. Yeah.
I think it's worth going through chat, making some corrections too, because we got some people who I love who are getting a lot of things wrong with this. It's worth, I think it's a few base stuff. No, it's worthwhile. What is a fetish? Like, as a thing, like someone asked, and it's a fair question because it's central to this. And he went over, like, early on the examples of it, but it's, I want to be very clear that it's not what anyone has answered so far in chat. So, Lisa said something fake. No. Pippo said that
it's not entirely. She's put her finger on something a little bit there, because the word fake itself, I think, is a common root too. Like, it's talking about something that is the result of fabrication at some level. It's specifically something that is made, right?
Well, then what isn't a fetish?
Well, God, obviously, Brooks.
So the term fetish specifically comes from, that's what he went through, the interaction with the conquistadors with backwards tribal people. They saw these carvings that people had made, and they went, wait, you worship those? Yes. Didn't you make those? Yes. And they're divine? Yes. So you made a divine thing with your own hands? Yes. Are you stupid? Yeah. Basically is the interaction. And they went and called those things fetishes. Conversely, they have their own sort of weird thing. Because the idea of a fetish is being this object that is made and made divine. Wouldn't religious icons be the same thing for the Catholics?
Yes. Yeah.
And they would go, no, of course not. God, we don't believe they're divine. They're made by man. They're blessed. And they're used to, worship saints. But it's not worship. It's not the same kind of worship as a god. We delineate and they rationalize and rationalize. A fetish is an object that has this odd thing that is made by man and also has power. And both at once. Specifically, a fetish is that thing that has power, but is made, is artificial, would be the term. This is where Freud kind of goes, and the moderns call it that. I'm hesitant to use that because Latour is also hesitant, but it's one of those things like man-made and divine, which seems like it's a contradiction in terms. Thus, the term fetish being sort of a derogatory thing about those who have, oh, you believe in fetishes. When in reality, the flip is kind of the thing. So a fetish isn't something fake.
No. I'm merely pointing out that there is a potential like it's certainly
they,
a conceptual root between the two.
there is for the moderns, for you moduns, there is
Exactly. Yes.
and that. But again, this is also the other part where we start saying it's giving things to a power that doesn't inherently possess it. No, because inherently possessing is kind of where I would ask what that means. Because, as Latour points out, the fetishes enraged the Catholics.
Yeah.
That worship, the calling, the belief.
Well, they didn't just destroy them because they were offensive. They destroyed them because they apparently were the
wrong
source
God.
of behavior and of belief.
Yes.
And so it's like and this is what's kind of interesting too. It is a thing, and it hasn't been remarked on here yet, but it is a remarked upon thing in a lot of anthropological stuff, and especially in religious studies that deals with this. That belief as such was not really, he is absolutely going to talk about this, but belief as such is not super relevant to a lot of quote unquote religions historically. That's a specifically that's specific to some things that come around the time of Christianity, where you have sincerity of belief, the obsession with making sure that your motives are correct, and so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
That isn't really ubiquitous, and you find like an attitude, and Nietzsche talks about this. You find an attitude among like Greek writings going back a long time, even ones that will explicitly talk about the importance of like depictions of the gods and so on and so forth, like in Plato, for instance, where there will be sort of like a blasé attitude about these things, as if they aren't really all that serious, but they also still treat them as if they are deadly serious in terms of they're important. They'll even identify them with like really important principles or concepts or whatever. And like the notion that the importance of a fetish was solely or an idol was solely restricted to its action on human belief is completely belied by the fact that they had to be physically rooted out and destroyed because of their effect on human practice and so on and so forth. The issue is obviously not just that they believe in false gods. They think that the objects that were fabricated to be the objects that were identifiable with these things were themselves generative of that belief. It's like a snake eating its own tail.
Well, and the quote he's using from Marx, and it's the important thing to say again, as from the beginning through now, where we're talking about religious beliefs is not like in things, it's of social relations. Marx is saying in that, and it's kind of a big point of Das Kapital across the board, is that commodity fetishism is about mistaking the social relations of people as the social relations between things. That's the mistake made at the core of commodity fetishism. And with capitalism, how it works is pulls out labor, pulls out the reality of the social relations that are in the objects, and it makes it about objects and capital and things, instead of about how social relations are really what is contributing all of these things. This is kind of what Latour is getting at, the nature of that religious thing that's happening with the Catholics, where it's like, oh, we have this process, and it allows us to be separated from the objects. Objects and God and that are all separate from man. We do our own thing, blah, blah, blah. That isn't really gone. It's more that shit transforms. And it's about the alien quality, as he refers to it a few times. It's about how it transforms and how it shifts, not necessarily disappears because it's not religious explicitly anymore. Because the mistake is at the base of it, and it's the mistake that you're going to make, a lot of people are going to make. This isn't about fetishes in terms of the fetish. The fetish for Latour or anyone else is an object. It doesn't possess anything, but it is about the relation of people. That's what all of this is about, the social relations that basically are working with objects.
Well, I'm actually glad you brought that up, because Gingeros, or was it Gingeros? Gingeros asked a really interesting question. So a fetish can be a non-religious object. Well, that's what's kind of interesting. The upshot of this conversation is that not just but also the discrete way in which fetishes operate actually puts them into a different domain than religion typically operates. There's a lack of intensity taking place in terms of modern notion of fetishes, which frequently like obscure the intensity that's actually behind them, versus these fetishes, which are very deliberate centers of a community, and they are very important. And they're
if you think about
as well, yeah.
if you think about all of them and everything is made through the forces of social relations. And that includes what I carve. That includes this video. It includes what you're typing. Everything's made through the forces of social relations. But we like to distance ourselves from those things and pretend that they are somehow out in the world in a way that we're not. And this is why Gingros, I think, also asked for a second to just go through the way that Catholics, and it is Catholics as my most fascinating thing, the latria and dulia, because you also have the third form. The way that worship works and how they talk about these things, there's the worship of God. And again, this is not about like worship of God being more powerful than the way we sort of venerate or honor saints. It's not about like differences of degree. It's not like one is a 2 and one is a 100. It's wholly different kinds of worship. And they even have hyperdulia for specifically Mother Mary. Because Mother Mary, she is super special and has her own kind of veneration that's different also. I promise. I'm so certain. And it's because, again, the way that they want and they break for Latour, as Latour's argument would be, that the way that this sort of plays at is, how can something be made by humans? Icons, rosary beads, the cross that you're praying to, these things that are literal idols. Like, you're praying to a cross. That's a golden calf. It's a golden cross. The fuck's the difference? It's like, oh, no, wait, no, it's different because of this, and this, and these rationalizations and these other stories. And ultimately, as Latour says, it's one group of people covered with amulets meeting another person covered with amulets, yelling at one that the other is bullshit. And it's this particular taste and this particular style that creates that separation of the thing, as if the thing could exist by God's hand, as if it could exist divinely, as if it could exist outside of man and social forces. That's the underlying thing. Because if everything is able to be made by man, well, that kind of fucks with the idea of...
specifically projecting a distinction between the psychology of that's just a subject, and the object that can be represented visually. Something that's actually, since we're talking about carvings, is really interesting. We talk about the Tinian Codex that's in the Museum of Davos Skald in Andor Season 2, in which a sorry, I can't. No,
it's Pippa has the line in there. It's, the cross is an icon. It is supposed to remind you of the divinity. It isn't supposed to be the divinity. That is a fucking in-here trick. That's an in-here trick, because the cross is supposed to remind you of the divinity. It's an icon. It's a religious icon. It's not just another object. It exists as part of the same social forces and everything else. And that trick that modernity is playing is the deal. It's almost the belief, so deep in belief, that it creates that separation. And that's, again, the thing that it's going back to, and it's why I like the Marx reference, is it's just like, hey, commodity fetishism pretends that commodities make themselves, or that factories make them, and that it's not about complicated social reactions and interactions. And I think you see that thing politically now. You see people talk about that same thing across the board now. And the reality is, it's all social relations. But the more that we can separate, the more that we can create that division, the more that we can act like those things would exist outside of the people who produce them and the social forces that are pushing it. Because Elon Musk made Tesla, right? The Teslas exist as their own thing. They're commodities. They're separate. They're not part of man's creative process. They're a man's, or a company's, or just the economy doing its thing. It gives us that modern spin that allows us to be separate from our own creation and continually fucked with, to be frank.
We're done.
I think we're done for the night.
We're done. We'll be back on Wednesday.
Solid reading.
Yeah. We got all of. Let's see.
We're pretty far. We're
page
getting
11.
pretty far.
Yeah, we're about halfway through the end of part 1.
Yeah, it's
a
a solid
little
read.
under halfway. We're there. We'll get there. We're going to be doing this a few nights. We're not entirely sure exactly how it's going to pan out, but it'll be there will be nighttime streams. We'll go through this, and we will go through the whole thing. We are technically, I think, about a tenth of the way through now. How long is it?
I mean, and I could go on. We didn't even cover necessarily the Durkheim footnote from the elementary forms of religious
might even
life.
be worth worth taking a detour on next time.
Well, I can actually just fit it in. I think pretty quick.
If you feel like you want, you can go just right now. Go for it.
Durkheim basically ran with, and it's why it's in the same section as the Marx stuff. The idea for Durkheim was that religion isn't really its own thing. Like, we like to think of religion as a separate thing from society, but instead it's that religion is the act of society worshiping itself, more or less, in a disguised form.
Sort of. Religion is an elementary form of society.
That's not what Durkheim, really?
Yeah, elementary forms of religious life.
Because I thought it was God is essentially a disguised form of the way of worshiping society.
Yes, but the cultures that he is dealing with at a totemic level, like, obviously are in many cases pre-God, capital G, in that way, right? Oftentimes, like the totemic principle of Durkheim.
No, gods. Yeah, no, Durkheim was talking about God, like pantheistic type, animistic type gods.
Well,
but,
not even necessarily, though, because the social principle that allows it is totemism, but it has to do with the social relationship to an image, not necessarily the content of the image. It doesn't necessarily have to have that weight. The point is just a common regard, not the
well, and I think that's what Latour says is basically it fucks you, because when you realize this, it puts you in this really weird place. You remove the illusion of the fetish, right? When you start realizing this, but you don't give autonomy back to individuals. Like, that's not what's happening. The fetishistic idea is, hey, I made a thing, I created a thing, God chose me and I built it, and I'm making it, and now it's talking to me. There's a very individual sort of one-to-one reality, even though it is larger social sort of setups. When we realize we're not doing that, like Durkheim's critique, and when we're actually worshiping gods or whatever through society sort of as a thing, that it puts us in a place where it's like, so then wait, then where are the forces? Well, like I was saying, people are determined by social forces that are just as opaque as religious phenomena.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
in the other setup,
the thing that it falls back on in Durkheim is a social principle that stands in need of explanation, and so there is just that one-to-one exchange there. It's like, well,
it shifts what is transcendent. In one, it's the gods who are transcendent. In another, it's social forces, which are transcendent in a lot of these
not even
sort
social,
of equations.
To a certain extent, not even social forces, literally just the social form itself, which then generates
the invisible hand of the market, for example, would be an example of that sort of replacement. That anti-fetishism doesn't eliminate transcendent elements, doesn't eliminate it. And that's his point. Instead, it shifts it into a new position. And that's why he moves into Marx as he does and starts talking through sort of the other books and the way that these things work. Yeah, I like it.
Thanks for
Durkheim's interesting. Durkheim's really interesting shit.
How's the origami count going? Mine's not going at all because my paper hasn't arrived yet. I think Brooks
27.
No, good for you.
So my son took a bunch of them and put them in his room and opened a crane store and he steals my nail polish too. So he has a nail polish and crane store, and then he sells my shit back to me. Very clever little capitalist kid. Except that I go up and I'm like, I don't have any money because I don't carry change. He's like, these are all 25 cents. And he's like, I've got change. And he gives me money to give to him. Which is my favorite thing. He just wants the money to circulate, man. That's all he wants. He's willing to print it for us poor bankers who are failing. But yeah, he steals my nail polish and all my cranes.
You should steal all of his money and then open up an outpost where he can sell his cranes.
I'm going to be at 30 by tomorrow because I tend to do them at night. He requests a bunch of them. I leave them next to his bed now because I am his worker, as he calls me. I gave him words to use that I found hilarious, and then they stuck. So, like, I'm his worker. I found him funny, and then it turns out to not be funny the 900th time he says it to me. But it is what it is. If I may make recommendations this Sunday, it's always good to have actually a chopstick when you're doing origami, because it's real. As you're doing things, you'll find that the folds need a little bit of help, whether it's the pressing of it or the ability to insert a very small instrument like a chopstick into a fine point of the fold to make sure it pops fully out. It really does help. It's like a real thing that people use.
That's not how the guy from Blade Runner did it at all.
Well, he's a fucking robot.
No, he's not. You're talking. That guy's not a robot. That guy's Italian.
They're all robots. Didn't you hear the retconning?
What?
You didn't hear about the retconning?
They're not all robots. They only made Harrison
That's what
Ford
Ridley
a robot.
said. That's what Ridley said. He said everyone is
he's
a fucking
out.
robot.
He's out though. They said it doesn't fucking matter. And
I read the Trump executive order that declared everyone robots.
I'm going to bed.
Which might happen, by the way. That actually might happen. Did you hear? Did we read his full fucking thing? Like his speeches the last 2 days have been genuinely insane.
What are you talking about?
No, I'm joking about that.
Okay.
But the Alcatraz speech he gave in response, where he just like rambled, and then he had a second.
We did read that, yeah.
And then he had a second one that's even more incoherent. And it's like,
okay, let's do that quick before we go.
No, I can't mentally handle that. I need to go. I'm just more just like.
He ran first.
I ran.
You saw it.
I ran. Thank all of you. Please join us Wednesday. And we're going to probably do a few more of these evening streams. These will be more relaxed, easier things overall, I think.
My name's actually Sunday, but I'll be happy to. Have a good night, everyone. We will announce when the next Latour reading thing is happening.
Thursday evening-ish.
Thursday evening? Okay, apparently I'm just getting press ganged into this. We'll actually have to talk about that. I don't know what Thursday evening is like. But
no, that's probably fair. I don't either. We don't know.
We'll cross that bridge when it comes.
But I'm tapping out.